the agenda. Apologies for absence. I think we just have Councillor Durkin, who is on his way to the airport, may or may not make the second half of this meeting. Item 2, declarations of interest. Don't think there are any. No. Item 3, to agree the minutes of the last meeting, pages 4 to 11. Do you agree? Lovely. Item 4, matters arising. Councillor Person, I believe you have a statement.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Members will recall that on the 7th of December 2017, they were informed which of the bidders had submitted the most economically advantageous tender in respect of the provision of the domestic waste and recycling collection and allied services contract. Members were therefore asked to make a decision regarding the acceptance of that bidder's tender, subject to formal contract and also subject to conclusion of the standstill period. The standstill period commenced on the 30th of November and expired at midnight on the 11th of December. On the 8th of December, a bidder wrote to the Council to raise concerns about the procurement process. In particular, concerns were raised about the operation of the tender evaluation model appendix to the invitation to tender provided to bidders, specifically whether the minimum quality threshold applied to initial tenders or final tenders or both. Officers gave careful consideration to the observations made during the standstill period and took advice from the Council's external legal advisors. Officers concluded that the instructions to bidders in respect of the tender evaluation model prepared by the Council's consultants could have been clearer. They also considered that had the instructions been clearer, bidders might have submitted different bids, and as a result the outcome of the procurement process could not be relied upon with certainty as having identified the most economically advantageous tender. Accordingly, the Council abandoned the process and will run a new procurement process. It is intended that this will be commenced within the next few weeks. The Council will put in place arrangements to ensure that service provision continues pending the mobilisation of the new contract. Thank you, Chair.
Well, Chair, I'm grateful for an advance copy of this statement sent to me by the officers today. Obviously, this is deeply concerning, and I have a number of questions and comments under matters arising that focus on what the future elements of this quite concerning issue will entail. And then I will have some comments on the December report that's in the public domain. And I would like the Councillor responsible, Councillor Burton, to have some comments about that. So I want to begin my questions by looking at the statement that we've received tonight. In the statement it says that it is intended that the new fast-track procurement process will commence within the next few weeks. My concern is that the Council have been aware of this issue since early December. We're now in late January. What I think residents would like to see is some timescales added to the statement that has been delivered this evening. Is the Council in a position to set out the exact date when the fast-track procurement process will begin? And can officers confirm when it's likely they intend to move to awarding the contract under the new fast-track procurement process? I'd be grateful for clarification on that.
It's fitted. Okay. Well, I'm surprised that Councillor Charles has asked this question, because the answer to the question he's just put is in the answer to the question that he submitted formally, and which he's been provided with the answer in writing today. If I can read his question for him. If there had been a challenge during the tender process, what would the impact on waste collection if a new contract is not agreed when the current contract ends on the 30th of June 2018? And the answer is the Council will shortly commence a new procurement process which can be completed before the expiry of the current contract. However, the Council is making the necessary arrangements to extend the current contract with the incumbent contractor for a short period, sufficient to ensure that a new contract can be properly mobilised, ensuring continuity of service for residents, which obviously is our paramount concern.
Those are not exact dates, they're not specific, and when I met with the Council's officers, Graham Bloomer and Michael Pitt, they gave an indication that they would hope towards the fast-track procurement within a timescale of May sometime. They were looking at what the timescales would look like. What I think residents would expect, because anyone that sees that one of the biggest procurements this council undertakes every 10 years is some timescales upon when the fast-track procurement process is going to start definitely. In a few weeks, I don't think is good enough. I would like to know a date, and when it is likely, under the timescales, that you would look to award the contract. That's all I'm asking.
Well, Chair, I'd love to disagree with Councillor Charles, but I would have thought the most important thing to residents is to know that there will be continuity of the service, and that's what we are guaranteeing.
And we're coming to those questions. The issue around the timescales is important because it takes, as officers have told me, 6 months to mobilise operations for the new waste contract. Now, the particularities of that mobilisation are very technical and complex because if it is a new tender, they may have to procure new vehicles. Those vehicles are bespoke build. There is a timescale element added to that. And it's not just the vehicles, it's all the systems and operations that go hand in hand with taking on what is a very large-scale contract. So if under the estimated time for the contract award, which was said to me by officers, it's more than likely going to be May sometime, the issue is that it takes 6 months after that date to mobilise, and the deadline for when the current contract ends is on the 30th of June. I'm going to come on to whether or not the council has agreed yet an extension to the existing contract, but does the portfolio owner not recognise the complexities of the mobilisation period and the 6-month period it takes to achieve that?
Councillor Charles, I think your question's been answered about timescales. I think the portfolio holder said everything on that. We will continue to keep the opposition informed as we get exact timescales and exact what's going forward. Working towards it will be business as usual, and residents will not see an issue with their waste collection. I think it's the most important thing. Exactly. I think we all agree. I think you've had your answers on timescales. Do you have any other questions, Councillor Charles?
I have several, Chair, but we haven't been given definitive timescales. I will make progress now. The next question I have, given that we're obviously not able to talk about the legal issues of the current situation, but given that there has been a challenge, what preparations is the council making in terms of legal contingencies for if a legal issue arises as a result of the fast-track procurement process? Are there any additional contingencies they're putting in place to manage legal problems in anticipation, given where we are at the moment and the challenge that has already arisen? I would have thought it would be sensible to put in contingency plans to manage any of those sorts of situations.
Well, Chair, it's precisely because of those complications, which obviously are legal issues, as Councillor Charles has quite rightly said, which is why we can't say exactly what precise date everything is going to happen. The main thing, as I repeat, that would concern residents is whether they're going to get a continuous service. And that is what we are saying, that we are making arrangements We have made arrangements for the service to continue and cover a mobilisation period. Thank you, Chair.
The next question I have, given that this is a very sensitive issue and residents will be concerned about it, what plans does Harlow Council have to inform residents about the way forward now? To explain to residents the current situation and to set out the timescales for the new procurement process so people are reassured by the way forward.
I'm sure, Chair, that the Council will be making sure the residents understand if they hear any negative comments about this, any threat to the service, we will make sure they are fully advised that in fact there will be no hold up to their service as far as waste collection and recycling is concerned.
Moving to the December report that looked at the award of the tender, what concerns me most is not only some of the wording of that report, but the comments made by the portfolio holder, which I'd like further explanation on. The first question I have for Councillor Purton is, do you take full responsibility for the December report that was presented to councillors for advocating for, and I know we can't mention the parties involved in this, for advocating awarding the contract to the successful bidder at the time?
Councillor, just being aware of time issues, have you taken questions on block on this about the portfolio holder, about the past report? If you want to do 2 or 3, I'm sure Councillor Burton will respond to them all at once just for time. I'm very aware I've got a packed agenda, so that'd be great if you want to do the next couple on that, and then I'll get Councillor Burton to answer them all.
Under matters arising, we are allowed to ask questions. Each of my questions are different, so I would be grateful if the portfolio answered my questions one by one.
So they're not all on the previous report?
They are on the previous
Would it be
report.
possible we can hear all 2 or 3 at a time so we can move forward?
I would like to ask them one at a time.
I understand,
Brian,
but it's how I would like to chair the meeting. Thank you, Councillor Charles. So I'll let
Brian,
you
may I get a ruling on this? Under matters arising, councillors are able to ask questions about the previous agenda in whatever fashion they like, as long as they are timely, and I will be timely with my questions.
I think when I go to the Constitution, it will tell me that you can ask questions, there can be a debate. It's at the discretion of the chairman, obviously. I think if we can move forward, even if you ask them individually, if you can move forward succinctly, I think that's suit everybody.
Yeah.
Well, I've asked the first question, may I have an answer?
You certainly can. The answer to the question is yes, of course the report was put forward, but it was subject to the standstill period and the wait, if you like, for any challenge that has come forward. So that's obviously the way the report was put forward, as any contract has to be subject to any challenge.
What process did the portfolio holder undertake to review the December report?
Oh, I read it.
When the portfolio holder introduced the report, he said the following, and I quote, "We have gone through quite a complex 2-stage tendering process to select a contractor for next June onwards. And I have to confess that I have not been as involved in this as I have been involved with the local plan process." Councillor Purton, do you think it would have been important to be fully cited on all the issues of the waste and recycling contract, given it is one of the biggest procurements this council undertakes every 10 years?
Yes, I was of course fully involved in the technical aspects of this awarding of the tender process. As everybody knows, it was a 2-stage process. The first stage was almost a procedure where we gathered market information. Well, it was a tendering process intended to, if you like, expose anybody who obviously wouldn't be able to carry out the contract at all.
So, sorry to interrupt, but I think we're in danger of going, with respect to Councillor Purton, we're in danger of going over ground that I think might give us a problem.
Oh, well, can I just say then that obviously I'm not a solicitor.
And I fully respect that, Brian. To help the portfolio holder, because I'm conscious that it's in no one's interest to go over the current legal issues, and I very much respect that, Brian. I'm asking about his involvement in the process of the waste contract, and he said, in his own words, I have to confess that I haven't been involved in this as I have been involved with the local plan process. On the biggest procurement, the portfolio holder has admitted he wasn't that involved in the process, but I'll make progress now.
Excuse me, Chair. Can I just say, I was involved in the process as much as I needed to be involved in the process, but I was pointing out that I obviously had a lot of other responsibilities at the time. I had a number of meetings with the officers that were preparing the contract, and I was satisfied with the technical aspect.
Going to my end of my questions on the December report, but I have some other further future questions for the Council. Under the December report, on page 259, there is the comment: the Council has completed a lawful competitive tender process, thus mitigating the risk of successful contractor challenge. And we can't talk about the legal issues, but clearly this misled opposition members, because there has been a successful challenge, as has been relayed in the advance statement that we have heard tonight. That raises serious questions. Does Councillor Purton regret saying those words in that report?
I think we've covered everything on that report, and I think that's covered that. We're not going to go into things that will get us into legal money territory at this current point.
I'm now moving on from the December report, and the public will listen very carefully to what Councillor Purton has said tonight. And this is a very serious matter, and I'm surprised at some of the responses from the portfolio holder. Some of the issues tonight have culminated in what has been a complete mess. The statement itself says that the council has had to abandon.
Chair, on a point of order, I thought this was questions. They seem to actually being engaging in rather a long speech now. Could we move on, please, Chair? I think all of the questions have been answered.
This is a question, and then I'll have comments, brief comments.
So this is a question.
This is a question.
We get to the pointy end of the question.
I'm grateful, thank you, I will make progress.
Pointy.
My question, Chair, is will the Council give an undertaking to conduct an independent investigation to learn lessons from this? And will they invite another council to act as an independent investigator to look at what went wrong, what lessons can be learned, so that councillors can have a report and then debate this issue? Because I'm conscious that all councillors will want to understand what went wrong with the biggest procurement this council undertakes every 10 years. So I think it is legitimate that we have an independent investigation to learn lessons and move forward on this. What are Brian's thoughts on that?
My thoughts are that since this started, if you like, since December the 8th, whatever the date was, we have engaged external lawyers who weren't involved previously. They have given us advice and continue to give us advice. I think we've been on the phone 4 or 5 times to them only today. And they are quite clear what the situation is, and that clearly they're looking at it from twofold, really, the legal implications for us and any challenges that we or others may make. My feelings are that at the end of that process, I'm quite happy to do a report to members based on what they have said and advised, and we always do lessons learned after anything like this. That will not happen tomorrow, because clearly there are other things going on. But at some time in the future, more than happy. I think that external advice is the best way of proceeding.
I'm grateful for that answer. I now have comments, if I may, Chair.
Yeah, fine.
Thank you, Chair. Tonight, we have heard from Councillor Purton that the waste and recycling contract and tender award had to be abandoned. We're now facing a fast-track procurement process. In Councillor Purton's statement tonight, he has not given exact timescales. We only are aware that the fast-track procurement process will start in the next few weeks. The issue with that is that the council have been aware of this issue since early December. We're now entering late January into February. Time matters because, as we know, the current contract ends on the 30th of June, and the council have made preparations under the original tender process to award the contract on the 1st of July, and they had selected a successful bidder. We can't discuss the legal issues around this, but Brian has been, I'm grateful to Brian, has indicated that there will be lessons learned and people will get an understanding of what went wrong. And I think that's fundamental to some of the issues tonight. We need to understand, on one of the biggest procurements, why officers have had to abandon the waste and recycling contract and start a fast-track procurement process. There are serious questions for Councillor Purton to answer tonight. In his own words, he confessed that he hadn't been as involved in the process of the waste and recycling contract as he had been with the local plan. He has tonight taken responsibility for the December report and the comments that lie within it. We are not able to discuss the legal issues tonight, but there should be an opportunity for all councillors to discuss this in open forum going forward. The priority now is to ensure that residents' waste is collected from the 30th of June, and I would expect the council to issue a statement as soon as possible when it is able to achieve an extension to the existing contracts. We haven't heard that tonight, and that will worry residents. Ultimately, this is a mess. This is a mess that needs to be resolved urgently. The opposition is very concerned about this matter, and so will residents. And Councillor Purton, if he was an honourable man, would resign tonight.
Thank you, Chair. I think this really is exposing increasingly the problem of contracts by the public sector. We've got Carillion. We've actually taken the contract back in-house and shown how effective that is. And given time, I'm sure many local authorities will actually start considering the whole process of contracts, how expensive they are. We're talking about expensive lawyers tonight, and all the technical details of, we've had to employ consultants to make sure of all of the procedures and so on. If all of that was done in-house, Chair, there wouldn't be any of these additional costs on the public purse. What we should be considering is not the paymasters of the Tory party, of the companies that want these contracts, but what's actually best for the public. And this exposes the whole thing about the problem of actually having contracts in this way.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just have a moment of clarity from Councillor Purton? Councillor Charles talks about a mess. I think the mess that the residents of Bush Fair would be concerned about would be a mess of uncollected rubbish, uncollected recycling, uncollected food waste. I am right in thinking that that's not going to happen, am I?
Exactly, and that's the assurance I gave, which obviously Councillor Charles is not prepared to accept for his own reasons.
Thank you.
Right, we're going to move on from that item now, but just to reassure the public, their waste will be collected, and that is not an issue. Right, okay, item 5, I've got 2 questions from the public. Is Sheila Sullivan here? Lovely. Thank you. Would you like to read out the question or take it as read?
I'm happy to take the first question as read, bearing in mind your agenda.
Lovely. Have you got a supplementary question for
Yes,
that?
I have indeed. Planning application process incorporates checks on building regulations. What steps is the council taking to ensure houses in multiple occupation in Harlow comply with building regulations?
Yes, thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank Sheila Sullivan for all the work she's been doing on this issue, which I very much appreciate. Doing a lot of statistical analysis and enabling us to have a clearer picture of these issues, which are fairly opaque as to what is actually going on. As far as the specific supplementary question that she was asked, I've been assured by
officers that when the licence investigation takes place, the environmental health officers do the inspection for the licence. They are able to identify any problems, any significant problems with the building regulations. The problem we have, of course, is that these conversions don't have to employ the council's building regulations department, and then they're able to get a private certificate, which is almost a form of an insurance certificate, which obviously is not something we're engaged with. But I've been assured that during the course of the investigations with respect to the licence, any significant building regulation issues are picked up. Thank you.
Ms Sullivan, would you like take your second question as read as well? Would you like to read it?
I'd like to read that one out.
No, that's absolutely please.
Stevenage Borough Council made a non-immediate Article 4 direction, removing permitted development rights for changes of use from C3 residential to C4 HMO on the 19th of September 2016. It was confirmed on the 24th of May 2017 and came into force on the 20th of September 2017. It applies to all wards in Stevenage. Why can't Harlow Council follow the same process in order to protect all wards in the Harlow district?
Thank you, Sheila. Officers have, subsequent to your question, officers have been in contact with their counterparts in Stevenage and will be studying the process of implementing the Article 4 direction in Stevenage. If the Stevenage policy approach is considered equally pertinent and applicable to Harlow, officers will prepare an appropriate report for discussion at the local plan panel. It will then be a matter for Cabinet to decide whether it would be appropriate to prepare an Article 4 direction for Harlow.
If you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I have. Which local plan panel do you have in mind? This takes a year, and we'd like to know, get some deadline for that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can assure Sheila that it will be at the earliest possible local plan panel, and I want to have this issue resolved within the next few months, because I regard this as a very important issue for our residents, and I'll be moving a motion at the council next week, making my views clear on how important this issue is. I look to see a report, certainly, hopefully in March.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, great, thanks very much. Item 6, written questions from councillors. I believe there are none. Item 7, petitions. I believe there are none. Okay, item 8, the forward plan, pages 12 to 21. Was there any questions on the forward plan? Any comments? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. There's been no recent decisions taken by the leader, executive or grant holders outside the normal process. And I'm going to move to take items 10 to 16 on block, as we usually do. Is everyone happy to take those items on block?
So moved, Chair.
Okay, so I move items 10 to 16. Do I have a seconder?
Secondly, Chair.
And I believe Councillor Wilson, you've got a slight amendment.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Those two slight amendments actually will take place on page 166 of the HRA business plan, and they are under paragraph 2.4, current opportunities. The current document states that a bullet point that states huge housing growth potential with space for 16,000 new homes and a garden town project underway. I'd like to amend that to huge housing growth potential with space for up to 16,000 new homes in and around Harlow in the current local plan period, with the potential for more in the future within the Kingston Park development along with a garden town project underway. I'd also, Chair, like to move under the same paragraph the bullet point that states £250 million investment in Harlow Enterprise Zone, building on Harlow's ICT and manufacturing legacy and creating 1,000 new jobs. I'd like to amend that to 250 million investment in Harlow Enterprise Zone, building on Harlow's ICT and manufacturing legacy and creating up to 5,000 new jobs.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilson. While I'd obviously save the main debate for next week, would be remiss of me not to say a few words on moving such important documents to the council. This year's budget has been a huge success and has shown what the difference stable financial management does of this council. Since 2012, the Labour administration has been working towards the point that we get to this. It shows how decisions we've made over the past few years, mainly taking the contract and creating HTS, has shed dividends to the council that we are now able to pass on to the council taxpayers in light of a council tax freeze. Our corporate plan is streamlined and more efficient, and we've set our clear vision for the next year for the council. We've got a strong medium-term financial strategy that looks over 3 years and the doing long-term financial management of many of our beloved services such as Playhouse, Pets Corner and other discretionary services. This is all under extremely difficult times with government's cuts still hitting us hard. And actually it's because of the decisions that Labour Council has made that we're able to weather some of those and provide a pay increase for our staff, council allowances are frozen, council tax freeze, no service cuts, and a secure future for many of our beloved services. So I'm not going to say any more, I'll save that for next week, and I'm sure there are questions. Who would like to start? Councillor Susan.
Thank you, Chair. Can you give us an update on what's happening regarding the cash office?
Okay. Yes, we have been reviewing where we are with the cash office decision. We are at a place where we decide we don't think that due to the financial management and listening to people that it is necessary for us to close the cash office in this year. We are going to spend the next 2 years looking into ways of trying to engage even further of people moving out of the more using cash office into other routes of paying and to allow us to finish implementing the rest of the customer service plan, and we'll then do a further update to the service plan in around 2 years, but the cash office won't be closing this year.
Can I ask one more question, Chair? Are you going to go out to consultation on this, please?
Well, the consultation was when it was closed on. We listened to people and heard the hesitations, or around some of the other customer service things that we decided that obviously for the next 2 years, that we're going to look into it. Obviously, any decisions we do take will be obviously consulted on, and we'll do full consultation now. But we have heard from many of the housing panels, leaseholder panels, many of the residents that have come forward, and we'll take that into account.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very grateful that we on this side, we were one of the many voices that were asking for you to reconsider your decision to close the cash office. I know my colleagues, Councillor Charles and Councillor Carter, were very keen advocates that you really rethink this decision, so I'm glad to hear that you've responded to our calls to hold fire on that decision for a moment. I'm just curious, what consultation did you actually take place? We were just wondering what consultation was already taking place regarding the cash office, before I come on to my next questions.
Sorry, that was due to take place over this year, and obviously to lead on to that and to make the final decision. We've obviously heard from that we don't feel that at this point a formal consultation to move forward in formal process it is necessary, because we've heard many of the opinions on it. So we think that actually the best and the most responsible decision to do is to spend the next 2 years strictly with some of the channel shift. We do need less people that, if they can pay by direct debit, they can pay online and can pay in other places to ensure that happens. But we do realise that we need to do a big push around that, and the team are working up a plan at the moment on how we do that. And then obviously, if we do need to revisit any of the rest of the customer service plan, any of that, we'll obviously do a consultation before any decisions were made to make any major changes, but that's where we're at the moment.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of quick technical questions before I run on to anything else. In the item under the General Fund Appendix B1, I noticed that there is an addition to the budget over £60,000 for the Playhouse. It mentions security and income. I just wondered if I could have a little bit more detail as to what type of security we are now providing, what the necessity for that is.
So it's actually increased over last year and has put some pressure on the funds, so we felt we had to address that within it. But we always had some security for some evening shows for our staff, just on the doors and around, it's an open venue. Staff started to raise some concerns during the day with some users coming in and maybe using facilities inappropriately and then feeling concerned. And there was a couple of instances at a couple of shows, perhaps children's shows that didn't expect to need security, that we felt that it was in the best interest to increase that, to have pretty much a security guard there when it is open at all times. It's not major issues, but enough for staff to feel concerned. We feel like the interests of our staff and the public are best served by increasing that. It wasn't an increase we'd kind of made within existing budgets, but felt like that should be a permanent increase going forward.
Thank you. The reason seems sensible, but you can appreciate £60,000 is a lot. I just wondered, has the council made any had been communication with the police or to see if they might, first of all, patrol the area before we spend £60,000?
We did, and we have worked with both community safety team and the police. What I would say it's becoming a bit of a bigger issue that needed addressing on a day-to-day basis. Unfortunately, that level of support wasn't able to be provided. As we understand, they can't be outside the playhouse every time it's open, and it was felt necessary for in the interests of staff. It was one of my main concerns, but the public as well, that it was just the best course of action.
Thank you, Chair. Under the continuing on, under Appendix C, just a technical question. The severance reserve for 2017-18, it's had no additions to the reserve balance, yet it's a proposed efficiency being taken out from the base budget. I just wondered if the portfolio holder for finance could just give us some clarification on that.
Yeah, we've reached the total that we actually need. I think we've actually debated this out before. And we don't need to actually put any more money into that particular pot of money.
I think the
Am
portfolio
I correct in thinking that we're not putting any in this year, and that is where the efficiency was, because it was in the plan? Am I correct in believing that, Councillor Davis? What I thought was okay.
I believe the portfolio might have just slightly misunderstood what I was asking. I'm not talking about 18-19, I'm talking about 17-18. In the proposed movement to earmarked reserves, there isn't a contribution going in, but it is a proposed efficiency, so you have to have it there in the first place to take it out. And I just wondered if the portfolio holder could elaborate a little bit further.
So, Simon.
Yeah, if I can just clarify the point, the base budget sits within the general fund, and that contribution will be made as part of the year-end closure of the accounts. So when the table is presented in the accounts, when it's reported to the Audit and Standards Committee in July, there will be a contribution into that fund in the current year.
Thank you. I'd now like to move on just to try and get an understanding of the general logic behind the way the budget was put together. We noticed that the funding of the playhouse has been brought back into the general fund, away from the discretionary services fund. I won't espouse an opinion one way or the other on that, but in previous years when we were in administration, we funded the playhouse from the general fund. We were often accused of not budgeting for the playhouse for the long term. We were told this was an irresponsible thing and it was better to actually fund it from a discretionary services fund that had at least a 3-year life. You're bringing it back into a 1-yearly cycle now. Have you had a rethink on that logic, and perhaps maybe it's not an imprudent thing to do?
This is an incredible rewriting of history. When we became the new administration, you had actually put into, I think you actually called it the big fund or something. You had
Big
actually
Society Fund, Chair.
Yes, you had actually put it into the Big Society Fund. You'd actually properly funded the Playhouse when we took over for the first year of when we took over. The second year you actually ran, and then not just the Playhouse as well, paddling pools, the nature reserve, and everything else, that you actually ran that down. And by the third year, there was very little going into those services, and by the fourth year, no money would actually be paid to those whatsoever. So you can rewrite history if you want. It has taken us a long time to find the money to be able to properly guarantee the life of those organisations. In the next 2 years, that's exactly what we're doing. Why? Because we're going away from private contracts. At the end of the day, you saddled us with the Kier contract for an extra 5 years. And those shareholders have been rubbing their hands for the last 5 years. Suddenly it's payback time. Suddenly HTS is actually paying back. A non-profit organisation is paying money back to this authority. And that's how we can actually guarantee these services.
Sorry, Chair, it's completely missed the question.
No, I haven't.
It's opened up a whole new can of worms for me. My point was, and the beauty of having our friends from your Harlow filming most of these things is we can always play it back and see the arguments played out. When we were in administration, yes, we did set up the Big Society Fund and we funded that. We never shut down the Playhouse, which is what happened under your administration previously. The Playhouse remained open. I'm not sure what you mean by run down the Discretionary Services Fund, as you now call it, or the Big Society Fund.
Is there a question? I do appreciate that you have a Is there a question in this?
There is a question in here, because in order to ask the question, we have to understand. I was trying to understand the logic. I said that when we were in administration, originally we would fund it for 1 year out of the General Fund, which was perfectly normal. We then created the Big Society Fund, where we created funding for a great many number of years. We was accused of not funding the Playhouse and giving it a long-term future. We funded it from the General Fund budget, and we did it in the Big Society Fund. Now, you have gone from moving it from the Big Society Fund, which is now called Discretionary Service Fund, back into General Fund. And I just wondered what the change in logic was. That's all. So either way, you've changed. And I just want to know why you think it was wrong of us to do it, but it's okay for you to do it. That's all.
It's rubbish, Chair. At the end of the day, you can actually look at the projection. When we took over 2012, 2014, 2013, 2014, you ran those projected budgets over those 3 years down to nothing. By 2015, there was no money for the museum, there was no money for Pets Corner, there was no money for the paddling halls, there was no money for the Playhouse. We can find the accounts and actually refresh your memories. So if you've actually got this amnesia about when you actually came and did what you did and left us the very, very poor situation that we inherited, if you want to rewrite history, that's fine, but we can find the figures and show you how you projected the rundown of all of those areas. We've had to grapple with this. The government has actually been cutting the grants year on year. £15 million has come down to £12 million, and it's only because of the way in which we've handled these finances and been able to actually go in with HTS to actually make sure that people in Harlow are now going to be the beneficiaries and actually guaranteeing these services. So you can actually argue with me, Russell, as much as you like. We can provide the figures tomorrow to actually show you the projections of how you ran those services or projected to run those services into the ground without any support whatsoever.
All I'd add, just briefly, is just that obviously I can't comment on anything before I was a councillor. I wasn't here when you were in opposition. For the whole time that it's been in my portfolio, we've always talked about having it in the short and medium term, and obviously using the discretionary fund as best we could. But there was always a long-term vision to find a more permanent solution for us writing that back into the budget, meaning that it was in there was a more long-term solution after finding that working in partnership just wasn't going to work to how we wanted the service to be provided.
Chair, I'm grateful the Playhouse is being funded. They do wonderful work there. I went there at Christmas with my children. Fantastic organisation. I just want to know why we can change on a sixpence like that. My next question, and the question was very skillfully judged by the portfolio holder, so thank you for that. So, my next question...
She had personal abuse at these meetings as well.
I don't think we need to talk about abuse, Councillor Durkin. Okay. Dan, speak up. My next question, if I may, Chair, move away from that subject. The 0% council tax freeze, very grateful for that. Again, I want to explore the changing logic. For a number of years, when we were in administration, we did move the 0% council tax freeze. In opposition, we showed a fully funded alternative, and we was told that that would not be sustainable, it was irresponsible, and could not be achieved. I've heard from yourself tonight and the portfolio holder that there's a very, very wobbly economic situation, very challenging times. And yet you have moved a 0% council tax freeze, which I welcome. I just again wonder what the sudden change of heart and logic is. If there isn't a blossoming economic situation, why you now feel it's not imprudent to move a 0% council tax freeze, but it was for us.
What I would say, Councillor, is this administration does not make ideological decisions and takes each year based on what is best. When we've looked in previous years, we had very tough financial times, and it was felt for the long-term stability that was the best decision to make. When we're in a slightly different place and we're looking at not just a one-off contribution from HTS into our general fund, but in a continuing and growing, we felt like that financial situation has been managed, and we felt that this was a decision that we could make this year. So I'm not guaranteeing, and I'm not saying we don't make a decision set every year. We do not make it based on ideological reasons. It's based on what is best for the people of Harlow, and we feel that that delivery and that money that we've brought in through the HTS contract is best and served on a council tax freeze. And we'll make that decision on a year-by-year basis and based on our finances and where we are.
Can I add, Chair? I go back to the original point, is it's payback time for people of Harlow and the community. This community, in my opinion, has actually been derived of a large amount of money because of the contracts that have actually been forced upon this local authority. In the early part of this century, we went away from direct labour, and for the first time there was a Tory Liberal administration, I won't go too bore you with the history, decided to actually start to go down this path. And then just before we came into power, 5 years ago, a few months, the clock was ticking, the Tories knew we were going to take over, and they gave Keir 5 more years, depriving of the community of a large amount of money, in my opinion. And instead of that, that was paid into as dividend to their shareholders and so on. I'm sure Keir, obviously, a generous contributor to the Conservative Party. But what I think has also got to be answered is the last 4 years, the council tax has been frozen as a proposal by the Conservatives. Not only would they have to actually find £300,000 to balance this budget, but it would be actually interesting to know 4 years on if we'd actually followed them down the line, their ideological line of actually freezing the council tax, of where another £600,000 would have come from. What you've got to tell us in next week is where £900,000 would come from. If it hadn't been for the council tax increases in the last 4 years, and if it hadn't been, which you opposed, which it hadn't been, of actually leaving a private company and going for a not-for-profit company. That's what we want to hear in the debate next week, Chair.
Okay, I'm aware that time is getting on, but yeah, and if we can both sides, we stick to actual questions and let's keep trying to get through this. I'm happy to have a debate, but I'm aware, let everyone speak. You have a final question, Councillor Perrin.
My colleague here was asking if he can have just a quick intervention.
Thank you. Just on a couple of points of clarification. For Councillor Danvers, the council was required to seek alternative providers for its services following a directive from the Office of the Deputy Prime Minister, who I seem to recall was Mr Prescott in 2002, and that's how the council ended up awarding contracts to Keir and Keir Harlow. The extension was only for 3 years and not for 5 years. And as a non-executive director of HCS Group and HCS Housing Landscape, I can reassure him that it is a limited company established to make a profit. If we don't make profits, we can't provide services.
Question.
Thank you. I will ask my question, and it's not our place to answer Councillor Danvers' questions. As opposition, we're here to ask them. So we won't be answering his questions. We'll be asking of him. He mentions, and it's a relevant to the question, he mentions he doesn't like private contracts. He thinks it's been a big mistake from beginning through to end. Does he think that the privatisation of the crematorium is a mistake? Does he think that we shouldn't be taking the profits from that into the base budget? Do you, as administration, have plans to bring that back into public ownership?
Once again, Chair, I'm sure Simon Carter will correct me, but I believe you tied that up very well for 30 years. Crematorium, a big business for local authorities, we've lost that. At the end of the day, we get something like about £200,000 paid in to we could actually have got, if we'd invested in that at the right time, we probably would have got far more. But yeah, at the end of the day, you've tied this up for 30 years, is it? 30 years for a contract. Tories do this. They tie people up in contracts for long periods of time. It's very difficult to actually go back to the whole philosophy of actually delivering for the public sector.
I do just have one final, and then I will end. Thank you, Chair. I would appreciate a written note then from the councillor to tell me how much money that we actually generated as a profit when the crematorium was in the council's hands in the last 4 or 5 years of him being in administration before us. Because it would be interesting to draw that comparison, since he had his hands on the levers of power at that time, so we could actually draw a comparison and actually understand whether it would have been better to have been maintained in the public sphere, or whether it was the right thing to do. I'm moving it to private. Thank you.
Which particular years would these be, Chair?
4 years before and so on.
Yeah.
Well, it's nothing to say.
Sorry, next question was it? Sorry, have you finished? Next questions? Sorry, Councillor Carter.
Thank you. If I can go to the corporate plan, which starts on page whatever it is. My first question is it available in normal print, let alone large print? The corporate plan achievements on page 29, for example, are in, I think, probably Arial 8 point. I therefore would draw your attention to page 13. Yes, page 13. Which refers to equalities and fairness, and that you will be ensuring appropriate equality training is rolled out to and taken up by all officers and councillors, reviewing and updating the corporate equalities policy for the next 3 years, and developing a corporate equalities action point plan in consultation with representatives. Why does this need to be doing now when we've been chasing you for a equalities policy for the last 18 months? It's only just appearing now. And I also need to refer you to section 140 of the Equalities Act 2010 and the Public Sector Equality Duty. And whilst I'm on the corporate plan, on page 27, there's a heading, a fair Harlow to be proud of. Now, when I was at school, a preposition was a word you didn't end a sentence with. It should be a town of which you are proud, or we are proud. If I could move on to the HRA business plan, page 156. When we talk about, it's talking about building council housing. There is a comment in one of the paragraphs demonstrating ongoing commitment following the publication of the new local plan to allow housing development within and or outside the council's geographical area. Well, bearing in mind this is in context of building council houses, I'm wondering what influence we have on council house building outside of our geographical area, or are we planning on building our own council house outside Harlow?
Well, firstly, I welcome the questions, and if the opposition member mainly comments is about typos, obviously respect the fact he's quite pleased with the rest of it. As far as building council housing is concerned, obviously within the corporate plan there are links to building council housing, and we are looking to building council housing within the Harlow area. And as you know, we're working within a local plan with our partners, and if that involves building council housing, then that's something that this administration aspires to.
So just to clarify, so your plan is to build Harlow council houses outside of Harlow?
I think the plan refers to our links with the local plan and our working with our duty to cooperate with our partners outside of it. If that means that, for instance, the Stansted Area Partnership many years ago brought building council housing out of Harlow for Harlow people, if there are similar examples where we can work with our partners to build council housing which benefits out of Harlow, the people of Harlow, then we are looking at those options within the local plan and within housing.
So that's a yes then?
Sorry?
That's a yes then?
Yes.
If I can, Chair. It's quite black and white here, but as we know, we're working under the duty to cooperate with our neighbours within the housing market area. Theoretically, there's nothing at all through the duty to cooperate to prevent harm or acquiring land and neighbouring authorities and sending the zone. But it is a process of negotiation. It's right to identify it here. It is something that is coming up in the duty to cooperate because we cannot meet our own affordable housing needs within our own district. We need to work with neighbours to provide that. This could be one solution towards that.
Correct. Thank you.
Sorry, Joe, I'm still not clear about this. Yes, I'm aware of our duty to cooperate and the need to meet the social housing need in the smart area, in the smart area. In the housing business plan, that reference is specifically under building council housing. It's put on page 156, about halfway down the paragraph. There's a section here, building council houses, and we're talking about building council houses outside of Harlow.
As for the reasons myself and the council officer opposite said, yes, we are looking to building council housing out of Harlow if the opportunity arises within the local plan, within our duty to cooperate. We're looking at all options because, as I've already said, this administration aspires to council housing. It's something that's in our corporate plan and it's something that we should do. So if you're getting confused, Councillor Cole, or if you disagree with council housing, I understand that. But yes, to answer your question is yes, we are.
Thank you, that's very helpful. If I can move on to page 175, paragraph 3.10. I'm sure you're all there before me. We're talking about repairs and maintenance, and it says the performance is being reported on contractors' response to tenants' requests. This needs to be even better. Well, according to HCS's November KPIs, 99.74% of standard repairs were delivered on target, with 96.8% customer satisfaction. So I'm wondering how you intend to improve that performance.
If I can answer that, Chair. I think continuous improvement and to strive for excellence is the name under that paragraph, and you can always do better.
We can always do better, yes. Moving on to the housing revenue account budget, as we're taking all these budgets together. Page 234. It's talking about heating charges and identifying what the individual rates are. We did discuss this at the Housing Standards Board recently. Just seeking clarification, guidance as to whether research is going into a simpler way of achieving this, because at the moment it's taking 3 years to actually deal with 1 year's spending. And I know a number of the residents, particularly in the sheltered housing schemes, are as confused as, well, they are extremely confused as to how much they should be paying, how much they paid, and what they should be paying.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is that your question? Who's next? Charles?
Are we moving to debate?
Was there any more questions? Everyone happy? Questions? Okay, yeah, debate, sorry. That's Charles.
Thank you, Chair. I will save the majority of my comments for full council and the debate on the budget. But I just want, as we traditionally set out the Cabinet meeting before full council, to make it very clear that this opposition will be putting forward an alternative proposal, as is responsible for an opposition party. What we have witnessed over the last week is chaos in this administration. You only have to follow the Twitter feed of the former leader of this council to recognise there are problems. The key theme of our budget comments at full council will be very clear. We are the party that will offer confidence to Harlow, confidence for people to invest in this town. While the Labour Party draw the daggers from their back, we will get on with the job.
Well, thank you, Councillor Charles, and rest assured this administration will be passing a budget next week that will provide continued stability for this town, and one of the best budgets that I think I've seen under administration. That shows the hard work since 2012 and coming in the Labour administration has made. But we will hear this all next week, I'm certain. Okay, so if
housing site east of Harlow, bullet point I should have been deleted as agreed at the last cabinet. And also under education infrastructure, later on in the document, I gave a commitment to Councillor Perry to include a reference to schools as partners, including academy trusts and independent schools, which again was supposed to be added, but has not been added. I can give assurance to members, this time I will personally carry out the editing on a computer to make sure it actually happens, because as far as I'm concerned, when I give an assurance in this chamber that something will be changed, I want it to be changed. Unfortunately, these amendments were not made in time for this meeting, but they will be made before the document is fully published. Thank you, Chair.
okay, questions?
Quick questions first, Chair, and then comments later. Councillor Pertman will be surprised that I have some positives from the local plan. On page 153, I welcome the fact that within the local plan we are looking at electric charging points for vehicles. As in the next 10 years or so we progress towards electrification of vehicles, I think that is a prudent decision for any local authority to factor that in. What I would be interested to know is, are the council looking to undertake a feasibility study of where practical it would be to put these electric charging points?
Obviously, at a later stage, before we installed them, we would obviously work out where they would best be placed.
Sounds yes.
The next question I have, predominantly my questions focus on my ward in Old Harlow. I'm very concerned when I received the map setting out all the strategic sites and all of the additional infrastructure that is planned under the local plan, to see yet again that a site was designated for 12 houses to be built in Jocelyn's. This patch of land is landlocked between Broadway Avenue and Jocelyn's. There's a very tiny road that is bordered between two houses. It would be very impractical for a development to go there. And I actually raised concerns in the first consultation on this years ago, and it was taken out and now it's been put back in. What was the reason for that?
Chair, thank you. This site was on a list of sites that were brought forward, as all sites that are considered for the local plan are brought forward, and it was considered to be suitable for development. Now that doesn't mean to say that it is going to be developed. It's just merely been identified in the local plan as suitable for development. It requires, in order for it to be developed, it would require the owner of the site to come forward with a planning application, and that planning application would obviously be subject to the normal consultation and consideration by the Development Management Committee, and obviously I don't decide what happens there. So this is identification of potential sites. It's not an indication that it will be developed.
My concern about that patch of land is it's always, it originally was a playground with play equipment, but it's used by young people to play football and for recreation. It's the only proper green space that is landlocked and is safe for children to actually play, and it's not near any busy roads. So what confused me was it was originally identified and then it was removed and now it's back in. What was the process that was gone through to actually put it back in again to the list of potential sites? So I'm just a bit confused about that because it had been removed and has been put back in.
I'm not quite sure where you say it has been removed, because this site has gone to the panel, and as far as I'm aware, it has remained in from after the panel discussions process.
Yeah. Obviously recently it's been put back in, but in a previous version of the work that was undertaken for the road plan, it disappeared from the list. That was my concern. I appreciate what Councillor Byrne has said though, that this is just, it's been identified, but that obviously there was no planning permission to be granted and no further steps have been taken. I'm just flagging it is an issue and residents are concerned because it's an important recreational space. I just wanted to flag that. My next question, if I may, Chair, is over, I looked on page 85 with interest at the infrastructure, the new infrastructure that's being looked at as part of the local plan. And of course something was drawn to my eye, which was the access route for strategic housing, for the strategic housing site east of Harlow. Gildon Way is becoming ever more congested with planned developments which I've opposed, junction and survey which I've opposed, and now additional, there are plans to have additional turn-offs. It's going to place an awful lot of pressure on Gildon Way, and I would ask the portfolio holder if he will undertake doing a special consultation with Old Harlow residents about some of the implications on that road and the pressure that could come from the local plan.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, obviously, we don't control the highways, but obviously we can make representations. Councillor Charles will be aware that on Tuesday night, the local residents were encouraged to, and agreed, in fact, to play a positive, engaged role in these developments, and I think that's what residents need to do. They need to get organised and get involved, because that's the way we can ensure that what eventually emerges, and I have to say at the moment nothing is certain, everything is up for discussion. When eventually the details are put forward, it'd be far better if the residents have been engaged and actually approve of what's being done, rather than wait for somebody else to make the decision and then oppose it.
My final question, I've got comments after my colleagues have asked questions about particular areas of interest of the local plan to them, is yes, I mean, of course I was there with Councillor Hurton, and one of the concerns of residents was that they will not have a say over where the strategic sites are going to be placed, because of course a full council was voted on and the administration put forward that the east of Harlow should be one of those strategic sites looked at for development. We're going for a Regulation 19 consultation instead of a Regulation 18, so all the residents can complain about is the policies that would dictate future development. I urge, and it would be remiss because this is something we have consistently argued for, I would urge Councillor Burton to think again about the consultation process and allow residents, like they have in other local authorities, to have their say directly on the strategic sites that the administration has pushed on with.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm surprised that Councillor Charles has made this point again, because I was at the meeting on Tuesday night with local residents, and one of them complained to me about the fact that they needed to be consulted again about these sites. What they were interested in was what was going to happen to the sites, and that's when they agreed to become positively involved in developing the master plans and the infrastructure for these sites, which is the way to get the best outcome for local residents.
Yeah, I've got a question. It's on page, I think it's 368, is the housing allocations. Number 3, reference number 3, land east of Catherine's Way, west of Deer Park. This has always been a playing field. I notice this is now down under this housing allocations with a dwelling capacity of 69. I knew nothing about this being on this plan until I read this local plan. This playing field has been there ever since I've known Harlow. It had a football pitch on it for many years, and then when football started to die locally, it was made into a playing field, and it was continually cut, and many families played all sorts of games on it. Then a colleague, or a council officer, the late Darren Zachary, was told about some frog orchids that were on the top part of this piece of land. The piece of land itself has got a higher part, then there's a hill and it comes down to a lower part. But there were frog orchids, which apparently are quite a rare species of plant, on the top part of this land. And Darren Zachary then took the playing field away and designated it as a meadow. This was a few years back, and it was designated as a meadow. Now, the council have always cut the grass around the interior perimeter, and people walk around there with their dogs or on their own, taking a bit of exercise. This particular field is spotlessly clean. Even the dog feces are cleaned up every day by the people who look after their dogs and put in the waste bin at the end. They had an agreement regarding this some years ago, and they are very careful, and they go around and clean up any mess. There is a chair on this hill which was put there some time ago to commemorate the death of a local man, and youngsters sometimes sit there and have a beer and leave their cans. These are all cleared up the following morning. All of a sudden, on this housing allocations, it's going to be used for 69 dwellings. I knew nothing about it, local people knew nothing about it. Who made the decision, and when is this going to start?
I'll allow Councillor Curtin to answer. I realise everyone's got a lot to say. I understand, especially in your wards, but if we can try and keep it to questions, I'm happy to allow debate, but if we can try and keep it to succinct questions, it would be really helpful. But I'll allow Councillor Curtin to answer.
Yes, Chair. Well, obviously, all open spaces in Harlow, fortunately, are used by local people. They're there, and obviously they're open. One of the features of Harlow, they're not fenced off, and naturally people use them for different purposes. And because of that, obviously the council has in the past and will continue to maintain those so that they are able to be used. But we
have to comply with the requirements of producing a local plan. We've identified 3 large strategic sites in Harlow, 2 to the east and 1 on the hospital site. We also we have a figure to reach, and we have to look at other pieces of land. We obviously don't want to look at our green wedges or green fingers or areas that are specifically identified as organised playing fields. So we are left with those pieces of land that don't fit into those categories, and this is one of them. And whether, again, I repeat my former answer to Councillor Charles, whether this comes forward eventually to be developed, and in what form that development might take, it might not be 69 dwellings. That's only an indication of the capacity that might be available. It might be a building for a special purpose. But we have to find sufficient spaces, dwellings, numbers, or equivalent numbers to satisfy the requirements set upon us by the government. And these are the sites that have come forward and been considered that are available. Whether they eventually get developed will depend on someone coming forward with a planning application and a planning consideration.
Thank you, Chair. Reference 4, Lister House, staple time used, staple time depot. And I don't know what the other bit is. Staple time used is the little service base. Are you going to therefore looking at that to demolish the service base? And if that's the case, where will the owners of the shops be going? The second question is the fence. I remember in December we were at Pound Wood together regarding the damage in Pound Wood.
Yes.
Now, the Fennels Park, where we're actually digging a hole now, was one which is for the overspill of the water. Is that where this is going?
No.
Are you sure about that?
Well, the first one, obviously, the Lister House site,
Yeah,
the Staple Tie Depot, that whole section of land down there belongs to the council.
Right.
And therefore the
Sorry.
electrical heckling. And therefore the council, in the form of the assets department, comes forward and offers this site for development. Now, it may be that eventually, when the plan comes forward for whatever is going to be designed for this area, there may be some shops left in it, or there may not. But obviously, it would be silly to look at the Lister House site separately from the Staple Tie Depot site and separately from the other site. They're all being considered as a contiguous area for redevelopment. In other places, such as Clifton Hatch, there was a redesign which resulted in housing, but also shopping and community facilities. I mean, all these things depend on what some imaginative person is going to come forward with. At the moment, we have to, for local plan purposes, prove to the government inspectors that we have identified sufficient land to deliver the number of dwellings we are required to deliver. That's all this is at the moment.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. If I can refer to page 320 under housing, paragraph 121.23, which relates to the questions from my colleagues. The report says the boundaries indicate the extent of the allocation area, but they do not necessarily reflect the extent of the land which will be developed. Fair enough. But the question is, do they indicate where approval will be given in principle? So are these areas now blighted and merely waiting for somebody to come along and develop them?
Can you suggest which specific area you're referring to? Are you referring to all the areas on the strategic housing list?
I am referring to page 320 of the agenda, the policies map, housing, housing allocations including the strategic housing site are shown on the policies map. The boundaries indicate the extent of the allocation area, but they do not necessarily reflect the extent of the land that will be developed.
Exactly. So you talked about all the areas, not a specific.
So I'm talking about all the areas.
That's the question I asked.
So you draw a red line around it, and that is an area which will be designated for residential development.
Yes.
And that is a given. It can't be used for anything else. If somebody comes along with an application, there will be a presumption to build.
That is the point in including them on the strategic housing list, but what the point in the report is making is that because an area is identified as a strategic housing allocation, does not mean that it will be completely covered with housing. Because obviously whenever any housing scheme is designed, it has to have certain elements as well. Even large sites have to have schools and things like that, and also open space and play space and buffer zones and so on. So the point this particular paragraph is making is that because a line is drawn around an area of land, it doesn't mean that that whole area is going to be intensively developed. It means it's going to be designed and planned as a holistic housing development.
I just know this question.
Oh, sorry, I was trying to finish. All right,
No,
sorry. I didn't realise I put you from in.
I'll give way to Kate Carter.
I do have one or two more. So, for the sake of clarity, if it is defined as a housing area, if somebody comes along with an application, there will be a presumption to approve housing in that area, regardless of how much of that area that you take.
Any planning application,
Yes or no,
as you
please?
quite well know, Councillor Carter, is looked at on its own merits. I can't determine whether any particular application will be approved or not. The fact that a site is on this list is that it's identified as potentially available for housing or other development.
But there is a presumption that if a residential area is highlighted on the local plan for residential development, an application by the Target Council Committee will be approved. That's why it's called development management. But I'll move on. If I could move to page 353, policy HGT1. Where we're talking about the Harlow and Gilston Garden Town.
So what clause number was it?
I haven't got that yet. It's 5.15, and I'll also go and talk about 5.16. It mentions the delivery of the new Garden Town communities based on Gardens in Principle. The councils have prepared a spatial vision and design charter framework, and then in 5.16 it talks about a sustainable transport corridor study. Can you tell us how those three documents fit into the local plan, where those documents are, and will they be available for consultation?
They are to be considered at a workshop, and if you want me to give you the date, I can, but it's in the next few weeks. Can I say they were to be considered at a workshop in December? It was cancelled because the weather was so atrocious that nobody could, because people were coming from different places, they couldn't get here. And so the organisers, which it wasn't us that organised it, it was the consultants themselves, they had to cancel that meeting, and it's now been rearranged for the 8th of February, Thursday the 8th of February, and that's when both the spatial division and the sustainable transport corridor study will be discussed.
That's very helpful, Madam Chair, but could you stop interrupting me, please, while I'm speaking? The question was how these three documents fit into the local plan.
Yeah. Well, they will, at the appropriate place.
Where? Where? We've got the document in front of us. It's not there. So where's it go? And how does it fit in to the local plan when we're just about to kick off on the consultation? How many times are you going to change it?
Well, when we get to the development scheme, you'll see when these things are going to happen.
What page is that?
It's on page 513.
Is there any further questions on that, or shall I let Councillor Wilkinson come in with a question? Yeah. Yeah, Councillor Wilkinson, you've got any questions on that?
Thank you very much, Chair. My question to the relevant portfolio holder is following the questions from the opposition about the dwelling capacity and the numbers. Could he explain to me the consequences of not having a plan, the consequences to the council, and more importantly, the consequences to the people of this town if we don't have a plan that adds up?
Well, I think the consequences are quite well known in that they've happened to a number of councils in this area who've had their plans rejected, and then first of all they have to go back and start again and try and fulfil the requirements, which you can't get away with. You have to fulfil them. The problem is that in the meantime, if you haven't got an approved local plan, then you can be subject to developer applications, which in areas that you don't want to be developed because you are unable to defend the town against those applications because you don't have a local plan. So there's consequences to us not being able to get an approved local plan. And part of getting approval is that you're able to satisfy these numbers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just ending on a positive note, on page 438, H5, accessible and adaptable housing. Policy reads, all new dwellings must be at least building control part M4 brackets 2 standard for accessible and adaptable homes to meet the occupier's future needs, and in addition major residential development must provide building control part M4 standard dwellings for wheelchair users. I have to say this is very welcome, particularly the emphasis on must.
Okay, any further questions? Okay. Any comments?
Thank you, Chair. Throughout the local plan process, we have been very consistent in our objections to the strategic sites that have been outlined by the administration. Obviously, I am deeply concerned about the impact on my own ward in Old Harlow of the prospect of the east of Harlow development going ahead. 2,600 dwellings is the capacity for that site. And then there are the implications for that strategic site, the additional road infrastructure that needs to go in place, the issues around other infrastructure like schooling, facilities, etc. I'm also concerned by some of the implications of the management of that development area. And I was grateful to Graham Bloomer, who provided a briefing to me to set out some of those implications within the local plan. I'm very concerned that there could be the prospect of closing the road at Churchgate Street towards the bottom near Feltmoors. I'm deeply alarmed by that, and residents would be very unhappy that that is something that is being considered. Although nothing is in writing and nothing has been confirmed, any discussion about that should involve residents. And that comes back to the fundamental point of the local plan consultation process. We're going through a consultation process that's under Regulation 19, or Regulation 18. So residents aren't adequately able to have their say about some of the dramatic developments that have happened over the last year and a half and the impact that will place on local communities. That goes for the rest of the strategic sites that we have consistently opposed as an opposition. When you look at some of the additional infrastructure that is proposed in this local plan, the north-south, east-west transport corridor, I understand the principles of that. But the feasibility of actually devising something like that, I recognise the ambition and the intent by this administration to see a modal shift in the decades to come. But of course, predominantly people in Harlow like to get in their car and travel around the town. And I think we need to balance the importance of modal shift with people's independence to get in their car and go from A to B. People will still want to do that. So there needs to be that balance within any plan for additional infrastructure, particularly road infrastructure. I'm also pleased, and Graham confirmed this to me, despite the inclusion in a previous draft that was sent to councillors of Travellers site to the east of Harlow, that has been removed. So all the hoo-ha that we had at the last cabinet, saying, oh, we've got to have it in, well actually it could just be removed. And I'm glad that you've taken up my recommendation to remove the Travellers site and we can move on from that. There is some positive developments in the local plan and future-proofing for future advances in technology, and that is welcome and that is responsible. As I said about the electric charging points for vehicles and looking about the feasibility of that, again, in decades to come. But of course, Councillor Burton and Councillor Wilkinson talked about the consequences. Well, the consequences of the administration's plan seem to be that pockets and communities in this town run the risk of being completely altered, completely altering the fabric of what they were and what they stood for. Village communities that will be swamped by excessive, unsustainable developments. And that is something that I could never support.
I concur with the statements that Councillor Giles just raised. The main problem we have here is the fact that this local plan has not undergone adequate consultation on where the strategic sites will be placed. So people do not have the opportunity to voice their views on where the housing is going to go. No one would argue that we don't need more housing. The fact of the matter is we want to be able to have a say as to where the housing is. In my part of Harlow, where I represent residents of Sumners and Kingsmore, there's been no consultation from the council about potential developments to the south and west of Harlow. When things have been muted in that area of the world before, people were talking about potentially 2,000 homes going down. The road network is not sufficient to cope with that kind of increase in traffic. So it's not so much the fact that we have new housing, and it's not the fact that we're not consulting on the procedure of this. It's the fact that the administration continues to set up a false dichotomy that if we don't go through this process, then we are in violation of government dictate and we can have things put upon us. No one's saying we shouldn't go through this local development plan process. What we're saying is, whilst doing so, we must consult the residents on where these strategic sites are going to be placed. And that is not happening. Councillor Charles talks about the way people like to move about and enjoy the freedom of being able to get in a car when they want. We must also consider that many of the people in this town are self-employed, and that many people rely on their own transport to carry a large amount of goods, tools, and such like. And it is not sufficient enough to just assume that people are going to change their travel habits just because of some new transport corridors. So, all in all, people just want to be consulted on the main meat of this, which is, where is the housing going to go? Because as it stands at the moment, they have no say whatsoever, and that goes against all the laws of natural justice.
Thank you, Chair. I think what's interesting with the opposition is that they're opposed to everything, but they won't actually give us the areas that they might actually want to develop. And it's laid down by the government. The amount of is actually laid down by a Conservative government in terms of throughout the country. of numbers that local authorities are obliged to do, and it's the legislation by the government that makes us actually have to consult with the other authorities when we used to be a strategic system. And what happens when the whole community comes together, when the Labour Party and the Conservative Party actually agree on an issue which impacts a large number of people and actually seeing the disaster as it's happening, the land north of Gilton Way? We all came together as a community to oppose that. I don't think there's hardly any one individual spoke up for that. But what happened? Went up to the government ministry, and Pickles, who's now retired, put his signature to that act. We have to obey rules and regulations like anybody else. Conservatives came up with alternative sites, then perhaps I could actually have a lot more respect for what they're saying, Chair. And the other thing is, we've been crying out for an M11 bypass for ages, and yet the Essex County Council are prepared to actually spend money in their favour. The A12 is being fully given 3-lane treatment. The A20 is being taken on from Braintree to Marks Tay. But when it comes to it, there is no money in the pot for a Harlow bypass from Essex County Council, which really would relieve a lot of the traffic pressures. So let's set the record straight. We're doing our job, and we're doing the job to the best of our ability in a very tightly knit town that's actually got very, very tight boundaries indeed. We've set regulations by the government of how many dwellings that we can have, and we've had to fulfil that. And we have an opposition saying, we don't want this and we don't want that, but we're not really telling you where we do want things, and that's not really the name of the game either. A lot of us would want to see any playing fields developed whatsoever, or any open spaces. I, for one, would actually agree with that. But reality is what it is, and this local government and all the work that's actually been put into it by councillors of different political persuasions needs to be actually congratulated, and Danny in particular needs to be congratulated for the hard work that he's put in for well over a year now in making this come about.
Yes, just to try to bring this discussion to a positive end. Mike's quite right. We can't just say we don't want something. We have to say if you don't want it in one place, it's got to go somewhere else. The opposition can't do that. They say they want to they want the ability to decide where development's going to go, but they don't actually propose anywhere for it to go. All they propose is where they don't want it to go. But I want to end on this positive note, which is it's my ambition through discussions with the County Council and hopefully working up towards a joint scheme that we actually not only look to, through these documents, to bring about marvellous housing provision for new residents of this town, but we also think about the existing residents, because they live in estates that were planned, some of them 50 years ago, or even more, and they need their estates looking at as well. And as well as looking to new development, I'm determined that we should also look to improve the existing street scene in our existing residential areas. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I was grateful for Councillor Burton's earlier answer about the infrastructure study and the other document.
Vision.
Thank you. And unfortunately my diary is free that day, so I very much look forward to coming, because I will have some questions about the super highway and how you're going to squeeze 2 extra lanes of buses down First Avenue and then down 5th Avenue and across the already busy roundabout down to the railway station and out again and up to Gilson Park. How you're going to get these super buses in and out of the town centre.
We have little faith.
I'm a bit concerned about the fact that the opposition are not putting up alternatives. If I refer to page 364 of the agenda, HS1 housing delivery, you'll see that the Harlow OAHN is only 7,400 dwellings. But Harlow, for reasons best known to itself, has set itself, not the government, Council Danvers, the council, Harlow Council has set itself a target of 9,200 dwellings, which is some 1,700 more than is actually identified over the next 30 years. So if we didn't need the additional 1,800 dwellings, we may not have to build on quite so many places.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Person in the fact that the local plan has to be sorted out. You can't just leave it. If you leave it, it's going to be imposed upon you. So I've got no problem with him at all coming up and getting on with the local plan. My big worry is that, yes, the government, this Conservative government turned around and wanted these particular houses. But prior but we had it imposed upon us, or we're going to have it imposed upon us. Prior to this, John Prescott did exactly the same. So he proposed that we were going to have piles of houses everywhere in exactly the same way. It goes back and back and back. So don't let's get into those sort of arguments. My big problem is that we have many people who are homeless. We have thousands or hundreds of thousands of people coming into our country every year, making the problem worse. Now, we need housing for these people. In Harlow, you've just outlined 21 smaller areas for houses. Once we take up those smaller areas and plant houses on them, we're going to be imposed on again in some time to come. And we'll only have the smaller little green wedges and the smaller little fingers, and pretty soon we'll have no green wedges, no green spaces, nowhere for people to run about and do anything. Sometimes you have to say no and stand at the counter.
No, I'll just come back. Well, first of all, let's make it absolutely clear to Councillor David Carter that we are not building on any green wedges or any green fingers.
Yeah.
Which is what you said.
No, I said yet.
Oh, yeah. Well, we won't, ever. Let's get that absolutely clear. Yes, obviously, every government since the Second World War has tried to ensure that we plan for the housing that the population of the country requires. The difference when we had, what was his name?
John Prescott.
That's the guy. The difference when we had John Prescott, when we had regional planning, was yes, we were told the numbers, but we got the infrastructure at the same time. The difference now is we're required to provide the housing. There's no way which they tell us how we're going to get the infrastructure apart from having little bits of money here, little bits of money there. So obviously they've now finally come to their senses and they are talking to us about a development corporation, which is what we are discussing at the moment. The last point I want to make is about the point that Councillor Simon Carter raised. Yes, it's quite true. We decided to come up with a higher figure than at the time the OAHN proposed, although those figures are constantly going up, and there's no doubt probably now we would have had to put them up anyway. But the reason we put them up was because if you we calculated how much social housing we needed, and we were only going to get a certain percentage of each development, and in order to get the amount of social housing we needed to have the total number extended, and that was the reason for it. There was a specific reason for it. It wasn't just that we decided to build more housing. So, thank you, Chair, and I hope we can now get on and pass this.
Right. Right, so let's take the vote now on item 17. That's pages 300 to 514, and we all agree. Okay.
Right, great. Moving on from that. Item 18, pages 515 to 593, the Town Centre Area Action Plan. Again, Councillor Burton. I know, take that.
Well, obviously this is a similar plan, development plan, for specifically for the town centre. It's at an earlier stage of consideration, and I'm sure all members will welcome the fact that we're going out to a Regulation 18 consultation, because we are at that stage. The document that you have in front of you tonight is an options paper. When you do an options paper, I have to say the data that's in the report is excellent. If you like, it gives us a picture of how the town centre was developed, what the policies were, what the strategy and the approach that Frederick Gibbard employed, and how that has to be changed to suit modern conditions. But obviously when you do an options paper, you are caught in this dilemma. Do you be so vague that there's actually nothing to talk about, or do you propose so many options that it looks as if you've already made your mind up? And I think this report very carefully treads a line between those two extremes and gives us an idea of the issues that need to be addressed, some of the possibilities that are open to this, and yet gives the opportunity for everybody to have an input and to express their own views, which will be taken into account in the consultation. So that's the stage we're at. We're going out for a Regulation 18 consultation, and then obviously following the consideration of the comments that are made, we will hopefully move towards producing a Regulation 19 plan. So I recommend this excellent report to the Council.
Before we go to questions, some second.
Second.
Lovely, great. Was there any questions on this, any points in the report? No, great. Any comments? No, great. Right.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
No, it's just comments. It's not questions on this.
Oh, yeah, comment. Yeah, comment.
Yeah, look. Town centre regeneration has always been a cross-party issue, and amazing. I welcome the change of heart by Councillor Burton to have the Regulation 18. It's a revelation. I mean, wow. It's really good news that there will be an open consultation on town centre regeneration, which has always been a priority for all councillors, irrespective of colour. I do welcome some of the ideas of the proposed outcomes, looking at what community facilities should be in place, looking at how you unify and rebalance the northern and southern areas of the town centre. And I'm also grateful to the dialogue I've had with Councillor Durkin on these matters, who has always been open, and to be fair to Councillor Durkin, he's always been very passionate about town centre regeneration, and he's always had an open door policy with the opposition, so I welcome that. And I look forward to us getting on with this consultation and coming up with some meaty outcomes to drive what is crucial regeneration for the heart of our town.
Right, lovely. So we can take a vote on item 18, pages 515 to 593. Please agree?
Agree.
Perfect, great. Okay, moving on to item 19, the Harlow Enterprise Zone, proposal purchase order, 594 to 614. I'll move this report.
Seconded.
Just a couple of words to clear up that obviously this is something we obviously did at an earlier cabinet about crossing the T's and dotting the I's in terms of an agreement we've made at cabinet in the summer, and just clearing us up to move forward with this. So, any questions?
I'm grateful, Chair. Andrew Brownridge has always been very kind to keep the opposition briefed on this matter. He's spoken to me on a couple of occasions about this particular issue. It is complex. Compulsory purchase orders are Obviously, the opposition, and I have a particular interest because it's in my ward, we very much want to get on with this. I recognise that these CPOs can be very expensive processes, but let's just get on with this because then Vinci can market the full potential of the enterprise. And so let's get on with it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, great. So item 19, pages 594 to 614, are we all agreed? Right, lovely. And we've then got item 20, item A is referral from the Scrutiny Committee.
I'll probably move this, Chair.
And you've got a second.
I second, Chair.
Lovely. Is there any questions on that referral? No? Comments? No? Great. Okay, so we all agreed on item 20, referral A.
Agreed.
Lovely. Okay, and item 20, referral B, the regeneration strategy. I'll move that. Second up.
I'll second it, Chair.
Thank you. Is there any questions on that referral? No, it's been through. No, great comments. No. Great. Are we all agreed on item 20, referral B? Yeah, agreed. Great, thank you. And I'll take items C and D together as they're similar. So do I have someone to move?
So moved, Chair.
Thank you. And second?
Second, Chair.
Okay, any questions? Comments? No. Item 20, referral C and D. Are we agreed? Fantastic. And to note, item 21, minutes of panels and working groups. Noted. Okay. I've been notified actually to not any matters there that gives me a